are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker podcast.
Welcome back, family, to the Storm Tracker podcast. Marcus Benjamin here, representing for CanesCounty.com, part of the Rivals.com network. Make sure you subscribe to the website, CanesCounty.com, for free. Use the promo code Miami30, and also subscribe to this YouTube channel live from Canes County. Joining me today, I have Adam Friedman from Rivals.com. He covers the transfer portal and also recruiting as well. He's kind enough to join me today to talk a little Miami Hurricanes football. Thank you for joining me today, Adam.
Of course, Marcus. It's always good to be here talking about the Canes. Lots going on in the transfer portal with these guys, and most notably, the recent announcement from Georgia quarterback, Florida native Carson Beck, entering the portal instead of heading to the NFL Draft. I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about him and this really good transfer class for Miami, even though it's a little bit on the smaller side right now. We'll see what these guys have to show come the spring.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the big news coming out yesterday was Carson Beck entering the portal. Very similar to last year, right? Where Cam Ward decides to enter the draft and then kind of backtracks and comes back to college. So it's interesting to kind of hear that yesterday, just because Carson Beck likely to be the fourth quarterback chosen in the NFL draft after Milroe Ward and Shedeur Sanders. So it was kind of a surprise just to kind of see that. But when the news did come out, Miami is projected as the favorite to land Carson Beck. People on the inside, of course, know a little bit why. The women's basketball team's point guard has a strong relationship with Carson Beck, from what we know. What's just your opinion on Carson Beck entering the portal, and is this a quarterback that Miami should definitely pursue to add to their roster?
I think so. Miami hasn't really gone all in, we'll say, on a quarterback in this transfer portal cycle just yet. They kicked the tires with John Mateer. They were trying to get his attention, but ultimately he landed at Oklahoma, which was expected given his offensive coordinator from this past season. Ben Arbuckle took the offensive coordinator job at Oklahoma. So, Carson Beck in Miami, there's so much that leads us to say, hey, he's probably going to end up there, right? The success that Miami just had with Cam Ward in a very similar situation, deciding whether or not to go to the draft or to come back to college for another year, and the fact that his girlfriend Hannah Cavender is on the basketball team there surely doesn't hurt. I think there are a number of other teams that are going to try and get his attention, even though he did enter the portal with a "do not contact" tag. I think there are going to be teams like Michigan, USC. I think North Carolina could really put up a big fight here. Oregon and Ohio State were rumored to be teams that would show some interest. I'd be surprised if Ohio State really went after him, and same with Oregon too, just because of the way that their quarterback room is set up, with Dante Moore set to be the next guy there at Eugene. If you can't count Oregon out with any big-time recruit in the transfer portal because of the swoosh and because of Uncle Phil over there. But we'll see how things turn out with Beck. I do think he's going to be a good fit for what Miami wants to do on offense. I think part of the reason he didn't end up heading to the NFL draft this year was because, like you mentioned, probably no better than fourth quarterback taken. Probably not a first-round pick this year. And he's coming back from that UCL injury in his elbow and his throwing arm, and he's not going to be ready to throw until the summer. So he would miss all the pre-draft workouts and everything like that. Whatever team he ends up at is going to probably shift their spring practice schedule around to fit his recovery schedule, make sure that he can really take part in it. And I think Beck ending up at Miami, though, is more likely than not what's gonna end up happening, I think.
I think that's music to a lot of Miami Hurricanes fans' ears, for sure. I like him as a quarterback. He's a guy that I've actually covered since high school. I saw him win a state championship for Jacksonville Mandarin. I interviewed him actually after the game, so I'm very familiar with his game. I was blown away by him in that game. I was wondering if he was going to even get a chance at Georgia for a while, because he was there for, a couple of years, but started the last 2 years, passed for over 7,000 yards, over 50 touchdowns, but 20 interceptions. I like the fact that he buys time in the pocket, but sometimes he seems to make some bad decisions at times. I think a lot of games for Georgia this year were probably a little bit closer than it needed to be with Beck as the quarterback. What's your opinion on him as a quarterback from what you've seen?
Yeah, I think what you said is kind of spot on in a lot of ways. Last year he had, Brock Bowers, who's, had a phenomenal rookie tight end, a rookie year for a tight end in the NFL. I think the best ever for a rookie tight end. Ladd McConkey also a standout in the NFL as a rookie. So losing those two options hurt his ability to produce on offense this season at Georgia. And on top of that, the Georgia receiving core led the nation in drops this year. So some more easy completions for him probably wouldn't have led to him pressing as much, probably would not have led to as many interceptions this year. Of course, that tough loss at Alabama earlier this year did not do him any favors. And then down the stretch, things kind of went sideways a little bit at times. So I think when he's got a more reliable receiving core and an offense that can stay on schedule, I think it's going to do wonders for him on the field. As an NFL draft prospect, you want to see him take it to another level, right? You want to see him make some better decisions, even when he needs to press, even when he needs to actually take chances. Just make some better decisions, be a little bit more accurate with his ball placement, and allow receivers to pick up yards after the catch. But again, this year, a lot of that was kind of sabotaged by the drops that his receiving core had. And theoretically, he'll have a better receiving core at Miami than he did at Georgia. There's obviously some big time guys already on the roster, and they're bringing in C.J. Daniels from LSU to replace Isaiah Horton, who left. And so again, I think that the way the offense sets up at Miami probably suits him a little bit more than it did at Georgia.
Certainly will be interesting if Miami ends up landing Carson Beck, but their quarterback situation is definitely a topic of conversation down here in Miami. And the question is, should they just kind of move on with Emory Williams? Emory Williams, a former Elite 11 quarterback, really hasn't had he's had a couple of chances in some games. 2 seasons ago, he had a decent game against Florida State, and he didn't look so good in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, though, in that second half, which, started off a whole nother controversy with Ward not playing that second half of that game. But then there's also Quinn Ewers, who was playing in a pretty big game last night. How about that game last night, though? Oh, my God, Notre Dame and Penn State. That was an absolute classic of a game. But there's another one tonight with Texas and Ohio State, which should be quite interesting. What will be even more interesting is what Quinn Ewers does after the game is over. Is he going to now declare for the NFL draft or stay another year in college? Is Quinn Ewers really the answer for Miami at quarterback?
I would be surprised. It's already been out there, I think, from our Anwar Richardson with Orange Bloods, the Texas site in the Rivals Network, has already reported that the plan is still for Ewers to declare for the NFL draft after the season and Arch Manning to take over as the quarterback at Texas next season. So Ewers heading to the transfer portal would be a bit of a shock, seeing as how he's probably QB 3 or 4 right now, depending on what happens in the game tonight, and theoretically or potentially in the national championship game if they do get there. But if Miami does miss out on Carson Beck, which is a bit of a stretch, Ewers entering the portal and potentially ending up at Miami would certainly be a shocker and be, I guess, probably the surprise of the transfer cycle, right? Everybody thought coming into this year, Ewers was a lock for a first-round draft pick. He was set up to have such a big season this year, and it hasn't exactly gone as planned, right? He's been hurt a little bit. His performances have been up and down. He hasn't shown the development that many NFL scouts thought, but that could potentially be because of the injury, and we're not totally sure how hurt or healthy he is. So, I think his performance tonight in the game is going to have a lot to do with the decision he makes after the season.
Yeah, definitely. It would be a shock, but nothing shocks me these days in college football. It's an ever-changing landscape, and the choice of Cam Ward's last year was an absolute shock. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happens again with the Quinn Ewers. But then I do want to ask about the backup or the current quarterback projected to start at this point is Emory Williams for Miami. This is a guy that I'm sure that you've seen. Like I mentioned before, he was an Elite 11 quarterback, kind of an under-the-radar prospect for an Elite 11 quarterback, but hasn't really been given the keys to the car just yet. Do you believe that he could lead Miami next year to, 10 wins, 11 wins like they did, or double-digit wins like they did this season?
That would be a pleasant surprise, right, for Miami fans, I think. I wouldn't rule out Miami as a competitive team next year if they did have Emory Williams as their starter, but they're going to be growing pains, right? I think he's only thrown probably less than he threw less than 30 passes this year, right? So he's not very experienced in the offense this year. In the past, he's certainly got more run over the 2023 season, but it would be, Miami fans would have to prepare themselves to grow with this young and inexperienced quarterback who's trying to lead a team that is theoretically prepared to win right now.
Right. He didn't have his best game against in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. We'll see what happens with him if Miami does indeed get a transfer quarterback. I would maybe half the house that he's probably not going to be with the Miami Hurricanes for this season, because I think he could certainly start somewhere else should he choose to do so.
It'll be an interesting dynamic, though, if Miami does bring in Carson Beck, theoretically isn't going to be able to throw for the spring. They need a quarterback who somewhat knows the offense to throw the ball during the spring.
Yeah.
Or would they work to keep Emory Williams on the roster if they do end up getting a quarterback out of the transfer portal, Carson Beck, or maybe even a Quinn Ewers type? We'll have to see how things turn out there, but definitely a player to watch depending on the outcome of Miami's quarterback pursuit in the transfer portal.
It's certainly interesting because if Beck does commit to Miami and he can't throw, and Emory Williams leaves, then that leaves you with Judd Anderson, who hasn't thrown a pass as a Miami Hurricane officially, and then you also have Luke Nickel, back-to-back Georgia State champion, has all the potential in the world, but obviously inexperienced with that Miami offense. So the spring or the next couple of weeks will be certainly interesting when it comes to the quarterback situation down here in Miami. But the transfer portal has been kind, I would say. I guess that's a nice way to say
Not
it.
destructive, right?
You're right, exactly. Not destructive for Miami. They did lose some guys that I totally expected to leave the program. A couple of surprises here and there. Isaiah Horton being the biggest surprise jumping into the transfer portal. He'll be playing his 2025 season with the Crimson Tide. But, of course, they did bring in a ton of players in this transfer window. C.J. Daniels, Charles Brantley, among others. When you look at this haul of transfer portal guys that Miami pulled in, which players do you think are the biggest gets for Miami?
Yeah, I think it's the defensive guys, right? We saw this defense struggle at times this year, and really, the offense just tried to put up as many points as possible. These games turned into shootouts, and the offense somewhat got off schedule at times. But Cam Ward was Cam Ward at times too, and brought the team back from the brink of losses, even getting a little help from referees here and there. But I think these defensive guys are the key to this recruiting class. Charles Brantley and Ethan O'Connor in the secondary. Brantley from Michigan State, O'Connor from Washington State, both 4-star transfer prospects, should be contributing on the field in major ways this season. And then up front, getting some reinforcements with David Blay, a defensive lineman from Louisiana Tech. Not someone who I would imagine is going to command double teams constantly at the Power 4 level, but was an absolute terror at the FCS level last year. He's 6'4", 300 pounds or so. I would say 6'4", maybe a little bit of a stretch for him, but not a towering plugger up the middle, right? This is a guy who can penetrate off the line of scrimmage, get into the backfield, create chaos, throw offenses off schedule. I do like what they're getting in him. It's going to make everything easier on the linebackers and on the defensive backs as well. So those three guys, really important gets. And Zachariah Poyser, a little bit, I think, probably a little underrated on Rivals right now. The safety from Jacksonville State, a big playmaker in the secondary, has a lot of range. Really like what he's able to do. And also don't want to overlook Emmanuel Farnley, a defensive back from Arizona. Clearly, defense was a priority for Miami in the transfer portal right now. That's 5 of their 8 transfer signees on the defensive side of the ball. And then a key pickup in receiver CJ Daniels. I believe he's ranked in the top. Yeah, he's number 19 right now in the Rivals transfer rankings. A big-time receiver get. Obviously, it's a really good receiver class nationally in this transfer cycle. So, but getting Daniels is a big get, a veteran who sure-handed, understands the nuances of getting open and route running and able to set up defensive backs to give quarterbacks easy targets. So, big get there. But those are the main highlights. Getting some reinforcements on the offensive line from James Brockermeyer should be big. He was, that last season was his first full-time starting role at TCU and performed very, very well. A high 3-star right now on the Rivals transfer rankings. Also really like the potential from tight end Alex Bauman. He's a guy who's going to kind of fill that spot that Riley Williams left open when he transferred out this cycle. So a great class right now for Miami. 8 players, 4 4-stars, 4 3-stars. They are number 6 right now in the ACC transfer class rankings. So keep an eye on that as more players are rated and some ratings are updated, and of course more players will be added to the rankings as well. So there's room for movement there, and certainly Miami not done yet in the transfer cycle, right?
Yeah, I don't think they're done at all. Hopefully we hear some good news regarding the quarterback situation. All positive thoughts about Miami's transfer class. But I do want to just kind of, play devil's advocate, I guess you could say. When you look at this transfer class, which player that committed to Miami do you think was, that's kind of a reach?
Probably Bauman, I would think, just because there's not as much high-end ability there as there was with Riley Williams. Just the measurables aren't there. The speed, the size, just the playmaking ability as a receiver down the field. He has the ability. Riley Williams maybe somewhat inconsistent on that front for the Miami offense, but Bauman has potential. Right. It'll be interesting to see what he's able to accomplish at the Power 4 level. ACC competition, much different than what TCU or what Tulane saw this past season. So somebody to just keep an eye on there, hoping to get some good production out of him. But as a mid-level 3-star in the transfer rankings, not someone who I would peg as a future star at Miami, right?
Yeah, we'll see, but definitely was a good move for Miami just because you lose an Elijah Arroyo to the NFL draft. You mentioned Riley Williams, obviously in the transfer portal as well. You still have Elijah Lofton, a really athletic tight end that you can line up pretty much everywhere. So adding Bauman, I think, is good for depth purposes. We'll see how he does production wise. Lastly, before I let you go, I did want to just kind of ask, I mean, who's left out here? Because we've got the playoff game that happened last night, another one tonight, and also, of course, the national championship game. So you're going to see probably a couple of more guys jumping into the portal from those teams. What player do you think could be available, or one that's available right now that is really just kind of the best overall players that Miami should, maybe just, see the possibility of them adding said player to the roster?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good players that are still out there available right now. Damon Wilson comes to mind immediately.
Right.
Georgia transfer, Ohio State, the leader there for sure. So an uphill battle for Miami if they want to get involved there. I like Brandon Cisse from NC State. He's taking a lot of visits and getting around there. We'll see where he eventually ends up. His recruitment is going to see some ebb and flow. I think we're keeping an eye on Quinn Ewers, certainly, right?
Sure.
Penn State's already had a few transfers out. So we're thinking about teams that just finished their postseason, right? They've already had a few transfers out, so not a ton that I would keep a close eye on there. There's a few players who are potential transfer portal additions, but I wouldn't say there are many on that roster who would be considered top available transfer prospects, right?
Sure.
But I'm just scrolling down the list here. We like Bishop
Yeah.
Fitzgerald from NC State. He's a good player. He's going to get rated here soon. Mitchell Melton from Ohio State intends to enter the transfer portal. We'll see what his transfer market looks like. Sterling Dixon from Alabama is in the transfer portal. Yeah, those would be some of the biggest names that are available right now. There are some players we're keeping an eye on, not quite ready to reveal some of them just yet. There's some discussions going on behind the scenes at each of these schools to make sure that they're doing everything they can to keep them from entering the portal. But
Speaking of that, man, I do have to ask I know I keep saying last question, but Xavier Lucas, man, this is like a crazy situation here. This is a South Florida guy I know very well. I wanted Miami to, land him along with OJ Frederic, who both of them actually worked out together, very similar playing styles. OJ, of course, a freshman All-American. And Xavier Lucas trying to leave Wisconsin, and he's being held hostage now, suing Wisconsin. How do you think that plays out?
Not well, right? Or maybe well for Miami, right? Because they would be the leader when Lucas does enter the transfer portal. Wisconsin tried very hard to keep him from announcing his intentions to transfer, and then even after that, tried really hard to keep him from deciding to really enter the portal, right? There are negotiations going on behind the scenes, and which have seemingly broken down, right? And he's retained a lawyer, and I don't think a lawsuit has been filed just yet, but that's a situation to monitor. There are some talks going on behind the scenes that we may find a resolution there, but it's going to be interesting to see how things play out there. Luke Fickell not coming through, looking the best right now. There's some of that luster's lost from his hire at Wisconsin. It was a big name that arrived in Madison, right? And some of these seasons since he's been hired have not gone exactly the way that Wisconsin fans would have hoped, right? And now they've lost pretty much almost every quarterback that was on the roster, right? And now things are playing out in somewhat of an ugly way for Xavier Lucas, who had a really promising freshman season up there, and Fort Lauderdale native, right? St. Thomas Aquinas or American Heritage, I can't remember.
American Heritage.
American Heritage, yeah. So, he's a guy who I would say, would end up at Miami if he were to end up in the transfer portal. We'll just have to see how things turn out. Interestingly enough, though, I believe his lawyer, Darren Heitner, is a Florida alum. I think he's an adjunct professor there as well. Just an interesting wrinkle. Not to say that the Gators are going to be able to snatch him away from Miami, quote unquote, but just something to monitor there.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a very interesting situation. Very, very interested to see kind of how that one plays out. Adam Friedman joining me from Rivals.com. He covers the transfer portal and also recruiting. Make sure you go to portal.rivals.com for more on the transfer portal. Also, make sure you go to canescounty.com as well for stories from Adam as well on the contenders for Carson Beck and other information regarding transfer prospects. Thanks to you for joining me today, Adam. I'll let you get back to your very, very busy life.
Thanks, Marcus. Appreciate you. Always good to talk Miami with you, and enjoy the nice weather down there while we're in 10 inches of snow up here.
Yeah, absolutely. You see me with the sweater on. Like, I break it out like maybe once a year. So, I thought I'd bring it out, and it's nice. It's a brisk 50 to 60 degrees down here, which is frigid for most of us. Gotcha. I'm sure a lot of people would love this type of weather.
Yeah, it's 20 degrees here.
That's frightening.
Yeah, it is.
All right, that's gonna wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. Make sure you, of course, follow this podcast on all platforms, as well as subscribe to this YouTube channel, live from Canes County. Most importantly, subscribe to the website, canescounty.com, for free. Use the promo code Miami30. Until the next episode.